Hello, good morning, and happy International Waters Day. My name is Joonas Plaan, and like Marina already introduced me, I'm a lecturer in Tallinn University, but most importantly, I'm an anthropologist. And quite often I get a question, so anthropology, what do you do? And most of you have probably seen the series Bones, and then first question after this is, you probably study bones, measure skulls, something like that, maybe even caves. But no, I work with people, and I work in order to understand the way they interact with culture, what kind of meanings they give to culture, how they create social connections, social structures. As an anthropologist, my work is to live the lives of other people, to understand the experience of their lives. More specifically, I am an environmental anthropologist, and I have studied the interaction of humans and environment, and focused in my studies on water, on the seawater. So I'm today going to talk to you about the meaning of water and the diverse meanings that water may have. I will tell more of my study through the presentation, but my main message I want to give you is that water is not one thing. Water may have various meanings. Like already Marina said, people in Perth probably value water more than us, for whom the water is common. It always runs from our tap. There's no huge droughts that maybe people in Australia may experience, but still, water is meaningful. And I'm going to try to explain you this within this next 20 minutes. I'll start with the meanings water has for me. Like I said, I'm an environmental anthropologist, but I never thought that I will study water or sea in any type of way, because as a Talliner, as an urban dweller, I rarely got onto the water, I rarely got onto the sea. And as for lots of people from Estonia, water or the seawater has been something distant, something that is far away. During Soviet era, it was locked away from most of the people, but still, there is one group of people who have, throughout their lives, been interacting with water, especially with the sea, and these people are fishermen. So I'm going to talk to you today about my research with fishermen here in Estonia, and also fishermen in Newfoundland, Canada, and how they give different meanings to the water. My interest in fishermen started really accidentally. Maybe like many good ideas, it came in sauna. I was sitting in a really warm place with a marine biologist who, after third beer, started to complain how much fishermen hate them. And I was like wondering, like here I have a guy who is a professional, who is professor in biology. He is doing his work, doing it passionately, but in the same time then there are people who hate him because of the work he does. So I got interested in that. Why do fishermen hate biologists? And for that I did both my BA research and my master's research in Kihnu Island, Estonia. Those who don't know, Kihnu Island is a small island off from southwest coast of Estonia. It's a really unique island with a really interesting and beautiful culture. Not like most other small islands in Estonia, the people there have been living more than 300 years, and they have never been forced to leave the place. They have never been forced to move away from there. Hence, their culture has preserved really well, and it has become a kind of a brand. It has become something where tourists from other places in the world try to go. And at the same time also, it's much different from most of Estonian culture. So, as an anthropologist, I decided to go to Kihnu Island to study the other, to study the exotic fishermen of Kihnu Island. And I must say, they are much different than most of us Estonians are. The way they interact with the sea, the way they interact with their environment, the way they understand what is the world in general. So, as an anthropologist, my work, usually people ask, so what do you do then? Like, you go there and measure the heads of Kihnu fishermen? No. Main methods that we use are interviewing and participant observation. We go there to the island or to the community that we are trying to understand and then interview them. But most often, we just live together with them. We participate and observe. This is the main methods for anthropologists in order to understand the experience of others. How, for example, fishermen experience their life, how hairdressers experience their life, how hunters experience their life, whoever. But the main thing is that simply by interviewing, you're not actually getting the understanding of the experience. And for that, then, I really went out there and went fishing with men and spent 2 months on the Baltic Sea and fishing Baltic herring, fishing perch, and trying to understand the experience they have about the sea, the experience they have about the water. And I learned from this, through those 2 months being on the water, that water has really important meaning for them. This is the place where their culture actually is being formed. This is the place where social structures are formed. By being on the water, by working on the water, people really understand about their world. For example, for Kihnu people, seals, gray seals, used to be long time part of their society, part of their culture. They were looked as humans, the same way as they were looking at people who were living next to their houses. For them, the sea wasn't just a natural space. For them, it was a cultural space. There's no word nature in Kihnu dialect. For that, they use word backyard or yard. This is part of their everyday activity. The water is then sort of a way how they construct their self, how they construct their identity. And I learned that only through being with them on that water for an extended period of time. But I also learned then there that Kihnu fishers are not the only people who are on the water. There are sailors, there are tourists, there are also environmental biologists, the same way like my friend in the sauna, who is trying to work also in the water. I learned that then every different group of people have different meanings for water. For my friend, the environmental biologist, water is something that is biological. It is a chemical compound that is full of different species. It's a space that needs to be somehow protected. For him saying that seals may be humans, like every other human, it's a matter of laugh. It's an anecdote. It doesn't make any sense. And because of that, this created lots of conflicts. Those different meanings that people were giving to the water, Kihnu people saying that the sea water is part of our culture, is part of us, didn't make sense to marine biologists who was saying that this is a matter of this is a matter that needs to be protected. This is environment, this is nature, and humans don't have any room in there. I'm not trying to say here that biologists are wrong or Kihnu people are right. There's no such thing, especially in anthropology, saying that what is wrong and what is right. There are different meanings. And I believe this is the greatest value that, that anthropology can bring by showing those different meanings that people may give to different aspects of our life. And water, in this case, became sort of like the center, the focus of meaning making of the world. From Kihnu Island, I decided to then move to Canada, where I did my PhD, and I moved to Newfoundland, Canada. It's the easternmost island in the middle of Atlantic Ocean, and there I did even more longer participant observation. I lived 1 year with a small fishing community. I was part of this small community for entire life. For lots of other scientists, this sounds like the slowest way how to do science. Like you go and do a fieldwork for a year. And for anthropology, this is actually the only way actually how to really understand the experience of being a fisherman in Newfoundland. I went there to study how climate change affects fisheries. And in order for that, again, I went for fishing. And boy, Atlantic Ocean is much more different than Baltic Sea. I learned really quickly that I get seasick almost every time I go out there. After I had done my interviews over the winter, I found a skipper who's in his back here, Tony Doyle, and he invited me to join his fishing team and fish for a season with him in order to really understand what it means to work and live as a fisherman on a sea. The first day already out there fishing snow crab, I was, after an hour on the sea, vomiting over the board of the boat. And like that throughout the summer. I kind of like became a joke, but also a legend in the fishery community, because for them it's like, you are a weird guy. You get every time seasick, but you keep coming back. You keep doing whatever like you're doing, and they didn't understand really why I am doing this. But for me, as a PhD student, I couldn't imagine to do my research without being on the sea. Hence, I went out there, I got sick, I kept on working. I kept on sort of like doing whatever people were doing, and through that, I also learned how much sort of like that water shaped my body. I was losing lots of water from my body. My body kind of like became part of the same sea that was actually shaping my own body. I was constantly like in that seascape. I was part of the water, and the water was shaping whatever I was doing. But through that, I also learned that I wasn't actually the only one. The same way like I was sick on the water, also lots of other fishermen had been sick. When I had been doing interviews in the winter, I asked from fishermen like about their seasickness, and nobody mentioned that. And I kind of like thought that seasickness is something that is for mainlanders. People who live in fishing communities, who have been fishing with their fathers since they have been small boys or small girls, they kind of like have, excuse me, they kind of have type of sea legs that me, a mainlander, don't have, that they don't never get sick. But when I started to get sick all the time, and everybody was talking about me like, well, this is the guy who gets sick but still keeps on working, then people start to share their stories. It turned out that the sea, the same way it was shaping my fieldwork, the way it was shaping my body, has shaped the local culture and social structure. Many men had been sick when they were younger, but for them there was no escape. There wasn't a place that they returned to Tallinn and become a lecturer in university. For them, being a fisherman was the only choice. Hence, they had to cope with it. They had to keep on working the same way I was keeping working on that summer. But then many people quit from the first trip. They said that they cannot be fishermen, and they had to leave the community. They had to move to other places, or they had to work on the wharf where the salary was much lower than being a fisherman. Here we are fishing the snow crab. But also, I learned that being on the sea has really been crucial for lots of men's bodies. Being on that shaking water all the time, it has really shaped the way they actually move on the mainland also. Lots of men were complaining that their backs are gone, or somehow they cannot move actually the way they were moving when they were younger. And it all has to do with being on the water all the time. So the water then was shaping the social structure. It was shaping the culture of Newfoundland fisheries. It was shaping also the economical possibilities that many men had. This is something that we as mainlanders maybe may not think, how water may shape our way of life. But this is just one aspect of the sea, and I bet for lots of here, it's actually not that important. We are not fishermen. Maybe some of you are sailors. All of us go for a swim in the summer, but we don't really think about the water the same way. So why is it important then? During the same time, when I started to study anthropology, in 2009, cabinet ministers in Maldives went underneath the sea. They went under the water in order to sign a document to call for global reduction of carbon emissions. It was a symbol to show the threat that water may have. The water for Newfoundland fishermen is part of their bodies. It's shaping their social and cultural structures. The same way it is actually doing in Maldives, but there, water is a matter of life and death. In the era where we are seeing how glaciers are melting all the time, when we are seeing unpredicted rise of water that is going faster, is happening faster and faster every time, it was a symbolic act to go underneath to the water and show to the world how important this issue is. In Newfoundland, there was also lots of climate change effects happening. For example, the water temperature was rising. There was new species, more species from south was coming to the shores of Newfoundland. Then others then were moving more towards north. Winds had become much stronger. People weren't able to go anymore out to the sea as often as they were used to be. They had to take risks they had never taken before just because they needed to fill their quota. In the same time also, seasons were shifting. People were fishing in December, a month where they had never been fishing in the history. Everything was changing in the environment. But for them, the changes in the environment wasn't that important. More important was, though, the economics, how much fish actually costed. So if you think for a moment, how do you perceive climate change, if at all? Especially here living in Estonia, in really safe place. How do you feel climate change? And I bet that most of you can say that, well, actually I'm not perceiving it at all. Or if I am experiencing it, it is through extreme weather events. And this is what was also happening in Newfoundland. While they were all agreeing that winds have changed, water temperature is rising, and in Maldives probably their land will be underneath the water. It actually didn't matter for that moment. What mattered is the price of the fish that was coming out from the water. So if we think about water and we think about it in connection with climate change, quite often I think the one good way how to do it is to think through economics, how it will affect our usage of water. So let's come maybe to home. Our home is probably the most important place where we interact with water. We city dwellers, we urban people who don't go fishing every day, whose income, whose salary doesn't account from the price of the fish. So at home, we are shaping actually also our bodies, the way we interact with the water, the way how much we drink it, also the way we shape our body, shape our space. This is all has to do the way the meanings that we are giving to the water, whether it is just simply a drinking water, whether it is something that helps us to wash clothes, wash our dirty dishes. All these are meanings that we are giving. So I have one question for you. Do you think or do you know where does your water come from? Where does this water that you're drinking every day, that you're using in the mornings to wash your teeth, where does this come from? Well, water, an answer that I was expecting. Everybody in Tallinn, they know where their water comes from. Ülemiste Lake. Those who are not from Tallinn, not from Estonia, it's that lake that you probably see first time when you're landing to Tallinn, the lake that's right next to the airport. And this is where 90% of Tallinn water comes from. And it has been like that from 16th century, hence it has been sort of like a traditional source for our water. This is we could say this is the most important water source for Estonians. In Ülemiste Lake, there's a small rock on this picture. It should be around somewhere here. Some of you who have driven on Tartu Highway, you maybe have seen this Lindakivi. Lindakivi has 6 dates written on it, carved on in it. 1826, 1887, 1908, 1960, so on. And all those dates, they represent a year when there was no water in Ülemiste Lake. These are the years when we had drought. And these are the years also when people didn't have enough water to drink. Water were brought in here with tankers. It was brought in from Männiku Karjäär, from other places, in order to get enough drinking water, to get enough water to keep industries working. But already when Tallinn started to see sort of first droughts, engineers were thinking, okay, how can we solve this problem? So since 19th century till 19th century, basically what Tallinn was drinking can represent only with this red dot there. It's Ülemiste Lake and the canal that comes from the lake to the city. Today, this is much wider space. Already after 2 first droughts, a canal to Pirita river was digged, and later, every time when we had another crisis, when again there was not enough water for Tallinners, another canal was digged. And today, actually, Tallinn is drinking water from a space that is 4.7% of Estonian territory. Through that also, we are actually taking water away from Pärnu River, for example, from Jägala River there. And these are the rivers also that are in the worst situation, in a worst ecological situation in Estonia. We are constantly actually drinking the water from other places. We are definitely, through the ways we use the resource, the water, we are shaping the entire Estonia actually. Of course, within coming years, we probably won't face the problem that we don't have drinking water. There's probably always going to be water in tap water. And engineers are already thinking where to take next canal, where to take more water, because Tallinn population is growing constantly, and we need that water. Of course, some things have changed. Industries have moved away from the city. The biggest consumer of water, the paper pulp factory on what is that? Next to Sikupilli mall, that has gone from the city, and we are using more and more sustainable technologies. We are using machines that actually are using the water. But even despite of that, climate change is approaching rapidly, and it's every year actually giving challenges to us. Summer 2018, last year, probably everybody who were in Estonia were enjoying the summer of their life. The warmest, the nicest summer. But at the same time, rivers were drying up, lakes were drying up. This is a picture from Paunküla estuary. This is part of this network that gives water to Ülemiste Lake, and that was already drying up. So despite the fact that we are, have expanded our water resource towards 4.7% of our territories, it seems that with climate change, it's still not enough. So next time you're back at home using the tap water, maybe it's time to think a little bit about that. How my consumption of water actually shapes my practices, how it is affected by climate change, and can I do something? Maybe next time when you are going to buy washing machine, you will choose that washing machine that has this A-level energy consumption. These are the ways that we definitely have to think, because water is not just a meaningless thing. It can be part of our bodies, it's shaping our culture, it's shaping the way we interact with the environment, the way we understand with that. And definitely climate change is one aspect that is in a way shaping the way we have to think about the water. So, thank you. I think now it's time for questions, or is pastry here? I have a question.
Just give you our present content. Forget about
Okay.
Yes, this is.
Oh, thank you.
This is Ecoback. Don't worry. Yes, and here it's written that water is vital for all forms of life. Like, very simple, but I think it will remind you this morning.
Absolutely.
You will be hectic in your life.
Thank you. And the water is not only source of every form of our lives. Like I said, it's also part of our culture. It's part of our social network. So. More, yeah. I can write my thesis in here. Yes.
Yep. Now it's time for questions. We have some time, like about 20 minutes, I guess. And the ones who are very like wanting to eat, pies arrived. Sorry, this is my thing about food in the morning. So yeah, you're welcome to ask questions if you have something to ask. No questions. Yeah. let's start. It's hard in the morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yep. Firstly, I'm not so pessimistic about that climate change because it won't happen at the first time during the billion years of world history. It happened so much time, like Ice Age, and then become like hotter again. But it's the first time that the humanity like distorted the world sources. Last year, maybe you know that for the maritime, that it will affect the world strategically so much, like the ship way, because the ice doesn't let big enter from northern seas. But then last year, as a big ship, firstly reach just from not enter from Mediterranean Sea or something, but just from Nordic Sea, and it will affect so much logistically that world thing. And also the thing that when some ice melt down, maybe create or reveals much undamaged green areas under the ice. So it will be maybe our second chance, because nature is so much stronger than us actually.
Well, yeah, thanks for the question, and I totally agree. Sorry, you.
It was just like an opinion and like,
yeah.
Introduction.
No, I agree that especially we Western people coming from wealthier nations, for us climate change may not be that urgent and not that problematic. At least that's how it feels for us, because for us we have always some type of safety net, whether it is the state, the government. There's always escape route. If the water starts to rise, maybe let's move to other place. If in Perth it becomes too uncomfortable because I have to, or I'm allowed only to use 10 liters of water per day, then I'll move to Tallinn where there's no issue with water. So I would challenge you to ask the same question from South Africans, from Australians who are actually really facing those droughts and for whom it is really problematic. But at the same time, again, I agree with you that everything is changing. Truly, it's not only that we are seeing problems that climate change brings. It definitely brings us lots of opportunities, and you brought a good example from Baffin Strait, that we are seeing that the ice is melting, and we may open much shorter route between Asia and Europe. So it gives us opportunities, but at the same time, it is changing really everything. And it's changing in a way that we really don't know how it is doing it, because every year we are getting new news from scientists saying that, well, the warming has been much more quicker than we ever expected. There's more melting than we ever expected. And at the same time, then, it's not only that there's too much water in Maldives, but also it's shaping the way winds are blowing. It's shaping our seasons. It's changing every aspect of how we are actually used to live in the environment. Of course, the world won't end, but it will change. It will definitely be different for our children than it is today.
However, now question, you mentioned that also Maldives will be underwater paradise in recent years, but for a couple of 1,000 kilometers west from Somalia, East Africa, and then all Africa has water problems. So isn't it possible to make some canals and ways to direct that increase in water to Africa from now? So maybe it won't be destroyed. Maldives will stay stable to walking on for humanity, and no water problem for Africa or Australia to the east side. Isn't any possibility for that?
Well, there's lots of engineers and visionaries who are thinking about that. For example, United States of Arabic United States, that they were already planning to ship in some icebergs from Greenland to Arabic Peninsula in order to fulfill the thirst that people have there. But this is something that only really rich nations can actually afford. Somalia, they don't have that resource to build canals, and I doubt that United Nations will go there and start to dig canals because, well, they have enough problems. So the thing is, like I already said, for richer nations.
China has, yeah, because in Africa there's so much investments.
Well, and China comes in, and then everybody are owning money to China, and they are then like basically colonizing the Africa. So there's. It's a complex. It's definitely not that as black and white as I'm trying to say here, but it's much more complex. We have to take into account lots of aspects here. But I'm trying to like emphasize here that while we are actually not really perceiving climate change per se, we are not really feeling that it's threatening us. I think we should think about this. This is that may affect people on the other side of the world. So yeah.
Thanks for your talk so far. The chief executive of the Environment Agency in the United Kingdom announced a couple of days ago that climate change is affecting us so quickly and so drastically that Britain will run out of drinking water in 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he's making all sorts of points about how we can change behaviors in terms of how we consume water. So as an anthropologist, how would you suggest that we can accelerate people's change in their relationship to how they use water?
Well, there's one method that anthropologists are using. This is like a nudging, trying to push people towards different behaviors. And by sort of like understanding and knowing the way people behave and why they do such behaviors, like living a year with Newfoundland fishermen, you start to understand what are the sort of like the buttons to nudge, what are the buttons to push for people to change their behaviors. And I think in Britain there's some really good examples how social scientists are doing those things, are shaping the way people sort of like behave. Also, there's, I think, good example from London. I think there's I'm not like fully knowledgeable how true it is, but there's like a saying that everybody, like the water that comes up from the tap in London has gone through 5 livers, at least. So definitely this is a good example how actually technology can help us. Like we are not only changing the behavior of people, but also there's always need from help from engineers, from natural scientists, and together with like social scientists trying to sort of like nudge people to change their behavior, and then engineers and environmental scientists trying to find technologies how we can actually reuse the same water over and over again. This is the solution. But there's no sort of like, okay, let's focus only on technology, but not let's focus on the behavior, like everybody is still showering for 5 hours.
Okay, and the second part of my question is that's societal change on an individual or a community level. But how do you overcome the economic imperatives where like Britain's a country surrounded by water?
Mm-hmm.
You think it wouldn't be an issue, but and everyone says, desalination plants, that'll solve it. But everyone then worries about the cost. So how do we change political opinion around the value of changing our behavior to water,
and
relationship to water?
I think this is already the more difficult part than like changing the behavior of individuals. And today, just last Friday, there was a climate march in Toompea in front of the government building, where the young generation went there to make their voice heard. And I think this is one way how we can change the politics. Like we have to keep on like mentioning or reminding them that this is an important issue to work on. Like it's much easier for politicians to say that we will raise the pensions or we will get refugees out from the country, we will build new wall, because that will bring votes. But it's much more difficult to work with this complex issue of climate change. There's not going to be effects immediately. It's going to happen maybe 20 years after you make certain decisions. But I think we have to keep on reminding, whether it is through going to in front of government building or simply supporting the youth who goes there. Because like last week I heard lots of concerns from even from my generation, but from older generation who were saying like, oh, what's the point of going there? Like, those kids should go to school. No, we should support them. Go there, make your voice heard, because this is their future who is in account.
Hey, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
What are some of the developments or research that's going on that you're hopeful about right now?
Sorry, can you repeat them?
What are some of the interesting developments or like research that's going on in combating water-related climate change that you're hopeful about?
Well, I'm actually hopeful in many cases, and I think we have to be hopeful and bring out those sort of positive examples, how we are not fighting or how we are adapting, how we are working with climate change, and we are seeing lots of change in the energy production. We are seeing that the production of sustainable energy, reusable energy is rising. And all these are unfortunately happening only through crises. The same way like I showed the stone, like people were trying to figure out new solutions only when there was crisis. So maybe we start to think about solutions before crisis happens, before there's a hurricane wiping the town out. But still, we have some good examples how people actually are trying to find solutions, and already the fact that like everybody are talking about this is, I think, a positive change.
You were talking about the community in Kihnu.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yeah.
And you mentioned that there are people who leave the community and go live and work in the mainland and going away from the area and the culture. And this is a good example of a bigger trend of urbanization. People are moving away from rural areas, from coastal areas, where this relationship with water and nature has been an integral part of who they are. So looking at it in a very largest picture, is humanity in that sense losing its connection with water as well with nature through this trend of urbanization?
Simple answer, yes. I think this is definitely happening, and it's saddening. In many cases, the reason why to move it's economics. Like you just simply don't have jobs in countrysides, in rural spaces. But in Kihnu example, there's this another layer that people are not allowed anymore to go on the water, because for environmentalists, this is a space that needs to be protected. This is a space where we have species that are under threat somehow. So for them, Kihnu people, they are not allowed to do what they have done for centuries. Hence, the same way like people in Newfoundland, or probably in most fishing communities, there's not much else to do. This is a place where to go out fishing. So if they are not allowed anymore to use this water, then they have to move. So here is sort of like we have to, my message here is that we have to understand the different meanings people may give it to water, and maybe appreciate why for fishermen this water is so important. It's not simply that they want to go and fish all the fish out there. Believe me or not, like every fisherman would love that their sons and grandsons would also have the same resources that they have had for centuries. But for some reasons, there are some people who think that, well, they probably want to destroy it all. People who want to destroy usually are the urban dwellers, the people who own big multicorporal companies who go out there with their big ships. We have to really fight for those small people, those small-scale fishers and everybody else who interact with the environment.
So here, and then one question.
Hi. So 2 years ago, I was traveling around Indonesia, Java Island, mainly its densely populated regions, and I was really horrified with what I saw there, because people don't care about nature at all, and the situation is really, really bad there. Rivers are polluted, and there are no sidewalks, public transport, everyone wants a vehicle, and the air really gives you headaches. And my question is, how much of a difference does these little steps people in rich countries make, like this A-level water washing machine, while there are millions of people who pollute the nature? Do countries somehow plan to encourage maybe these countries to start taking care of the environment? Or
that's a good point to bring out, and this is like sort of like one of the things that lots of people bring out. Oh, well, like, why I have to change when, like, in China they're using all the plastic in the world, and we're seeing in Indonesia plastic bags flying around. But if we look at sort of like the footstep that we are, the ecological footstep we are making, it's still us, the Western countries, the rich countries, that are making the biggest footstep. We are the ones, despite the fact that we are buying the newest, the least energy using washing machine, we're still wasting most energy in the world. We are the ones who are damaging the world the most. So it has to start with us, unfortunately. We have to change here. And I believe by finding new solutions to new technologies, in the end also those third countries or those poor countries, they will change. But in the same time also, like, who are us to say that you are not allowed to, for them to say that you are not allowed to buy a washing machine, for example, or you are not allowed to have the same luxury that we have enjoyed for centuries. So there's like lots of like consideration. But I believe still it has to start with us, because it's us, Westerners, the rich people, the white man, who is actually has ruined this world.
Hi, I'm here. I have a question, I think more like data-driven. I know that in Estonia we have changed taxes for salaries. You know, like the more you earn, a tiny bit more you pay. Do you know any examples of like successful Western or whichever developed economies that implemented this certain same rule for utilities? Because I know, I don't remember the country, but I think something in Scandinavia, if you actually sort out your trash in several categories, it's cheaper for you to pay a utility bill. Do you know any successful economy who implemented this type of for utilities, water-wise? You spend 10 liters, you pay this, you spend 20, you pay more. I think we are kind of a money society, so one of those ways should work, probably.
I'm not certain of that, like the way, like the taxes for utilities, but there's lots of talks about sort of like, and examples how entire countries have taxed the CO2 emissions, and this is implemented in most of EU. Canada is talking about this, where sort of like those places that are emitting most of the CO2, like whether it is energy factory, whether it is paper pulp, they have to pay according to what they are actually blowing into the air. I'm like I said, like I'm not really familiar with the topic, so I'm sure there may be, if somebody knows, like if there is any countries where sort of like that single person is somehow taxed according to their consumption. But the way we are reusing our garbage, this is one way how actually our behaviors through taxes have been changed.
I would like to just make a remark about the previous topic that we had. Actually, half of the world's population doesn't have any access to waste management systems. So we're talking about those poorer communities who don't have anywhere to put their plastic waste. Instead, we should be asking who produces this plastic waste and who gives us the options, you know. Coca-Cola just revealed that they produce 3 billion plastic bottles a year. And the biggest kind of producers of this waste are actually the Western big corporations and companies. And it is their choice of packaging and materials is what actually will affect the street and river picture of those communities, because they don't have waste management system to deal with this kind of packaging. And which leads to my question that we're talking here about individual choices and decisions, but actually if we're talking about either consumption of water or using of materials and materials, is a question of how big amount of water is actually consumed by corporations and productions versus individual households. If you have any.
Well, I don't have exact answer, but good sort of like example is from Tallinn city. Like before we had that paper pulp factory on top of Tartu Maantee hill next to Sikupilli, this single factory was using more than half of the water that was coming to Tallinn. Once it moved out from Tallinn, immediately everything changed. So this is a good example how actually, yes, you're totally right. Like those big factories are using actually most of the water. The question is then like, what is the solution? We have to then, like, this is again like technological solution. We have to find ways how to produce something using less. And in the same time, of course, big companies, like there's good examples of that saying that there's like only like a handful of companies that are actually producing most of the pollution in the world, most of the plastic in the world. So if we can somehow nudge them, if we can somehow like ask them to change their behavior, that would be like the biggest help for planet Earth. And I believe we can do it through consumption, through our demands, by saying that also to politicians who are taking laws, and that then forces those big multinational corporations to change their production. So it's a complex, difficult issue, but still I believe it starts from us, and this is where we have to make the changes.
I'd like to make a related point that will bring that point, this point, and that point all together, because you're clearly data-driven. I've just been doing some Googling. Education and getting people to understand how we use water is going to be a really critical factor here, I think, to change behavior. For example, can anybody guess how much water it takes to make a car? 120,000 gallons. Times that by 4.5, you get liters. How much water does it take to make a plastic bottle? At least twice the amount of liquid that the bottle can contain. You multiply 3 million bottles a year by Coke. That's 3 million or billion? Billion, all right. So you times that by 4.5, and that's how much water is being used to produce the bottles that you're drinking your Coke out of. Right, so two things: educate. Secondly, boycott.
Thank you for that note. Yeah. And it starts with everything, especially like, for example, like the way we consume meat, like what kind of meat we consume. Like eating beef is much more water wasting than eating, for example, chicken if we want to eat meat. And so yeah, like good example. Like let's not drink bottled water, drink tap water. We're saving a lot of water actually through that.